what's going on? Good morning, good morning. Yeah, I definitely want to jump in, man. We're going to jump in the flames right here. Um, we're going to really get deep in a lot of attitudes and also a lot of things of betrayers and traitors. You know what I'm saying? And like Coonan as well. Now Coonan and bedwitching and maybe buck breaking or whatever. Those are very old. They're very old. It's not. It was kind of more. It came around the slavery era. But they're very old. You know what I'm saying? A couple hundred years old. Nothing really new, and but I also want to make it more aware that not all, dark-skinned people or really black or other black people is not really your allies. And in the quote of Dr. Henry Clark, we have no friends. And he's really when he means that, it can mean different groups, but it really means DOS, Black America. But the thing about it is that there have been many coons and a lot of female coons. Really coons are, it's interchangeable, to be man or woman. But a lot of coons and stuff, and you got a lot of coons that was going against the betterment or advancement or empowerment of, if you want to say it, they're of their own racial group. I talked about there was a slave trade. You had the slave trade that started with the Portuguese. Then actually it got started with the Portuguese. Then got reinforced with Spain. Then eventually you had Dutch, you had English, you had French, you had even Germans was involved. You had Norwegian involved. So you had different fractions from Europe that started getting involved, but also too the main thing you have to look at was the slave involvement of Africa selling Africans, and that's a painful part of history you have to talk about because sorry I just came up with all the place on me, but I apologize, but you got a lot of different groups that were being captured and being sold to the European slave traders, and I'm thinking, and when you really go back to that, there was always slavery in Africa. Man, Musa had over 60,000 slaves, and I think he accompanied during his pilgrimage to Mecca. He had over 6,000 slaves with him. You know what I'm saying? So, if you want to know who those slaves were other Africans, if you really want to get into it. And, I'm going to touch a little bit about the nigger and the nigga contradiction. Both of them is true, but both of them got two different types of origin root to it. You know what I'm saying? I ain't saying that lead to us, but you gotta think about it. Even Africa, that we all, as Black America, we all identify with the entire continent of Africa. Africa got many different cultures and language and different societies that's totally unlike each other on that continent. You know what I'm saying? So, but you had a lot of slavery that was going on in Africa. You know what I'm saying? People enslaving their own. Some people enslaving rival tribes and stuff and vice versa like that. And the thing was, it was a lot. Bulk of the slave trade was coming out of some out of Zimbabwe, some out of Congos, and some coming out of Nigeria area, and a lot was coming out of Benin. Ivory Coast and everything else. As you know, that was the slave coast. When they abolished the actual slave trade in 1807, but see, this is what I told a lot of people. The 1807 slave trade basically barred the slave trade from English involvement. Like basically, it basically cut out European involvement of the slave trade. But it really didn't cut out the involvement of the colonies to Africa. I mean, it almost, in a way, it ended the slave trade, but it didn't really end the slave trade. Because you had slave ships going into the Caribbean and bringing, you had slave ships that was coming out of Brazil, out of the Americas, Central America, whatever. They were still going to the Caribbean. Because at that time, those Caribbeans were still colonies. They wasn't free yet. They were still colonies. So you had a lot of people that was getting basically taken from those islands and brought to the Americas and the mainland, something like that. And there were also still, in some way, there were still some roots of some slave ships that were still coming out of Africa. Like people always told you, the Middle Passage, you had, they said 8 million. All right, this is where the numbers construed, because you said they were saying 8 million was transport. Now could that mean? Now this is where it gets tricky. You know what I'm saying? Now where there's a lot of Native people that was getting taken. Yes, I think they were too. A lot of them were getting taken. There's actual evidence and records of islands getting completely deserted because European slave traders was taking so much of the people. They literally took a lot of people off of one island and enslaved them somewhere else. So that's evidence. The Bahamas is one of them. It used to be filled of Tajanos and Aquas and Lycans. So I'm saying, and they're no longer really there. I mean, there is maybe a little small trace of them there, but the significance of the population was basically kidnapped and enslaved. Because you forgot the slave trade, this wasn't just going towards America. This was going towards all over the world. This was a four continent conveyor belt they were going on with this. You had slaves some going to Europe. They had slaves in Europe. I think in Portugal, and they had a lot of slaves was ended in Portugal, but they had a lot of slaves going into Spain and Portugal. Some venture into France, and I think some even venture a little bit to Netherlands or Dutch. But a lot, but it was more Indians, more natives, indigenous people that was going to Europe. And some indigenous went to Africa, you know what I'm saying, as well. So this was when you think about it, and I've been thinking more hard about it, it couldn't just be a white man. I mean, yeah, white man definitely constructed it, but it just had to be some cooperation, and I feel it was. I think a lot of Africans, they definitely took that initiative to get rid of some of their population. I think some people that to them was traders in their own right, but they think they were, and they banished them into slavery in that slave trade. But at the same time, the abolishment of 1807, at the time you had Napoleon, and this is kind of like, I think this is when during the revolution of 1804, this is kind of like after 1804. And, during the meeting of Europe, of the colonial powers, they were deciding if they want to keep on with the slave trade. You know what I'm saying? Now, slavery was still going on in these colonies, but they just want to know, is it still, if there's still a need to keep up with the slave trade, or to really keep need of basically, what I would say, maintaining slavery in these colonies. At the time, now 1807. This is when they signed it. They were really talking about this in, I think, the early 1801. Like 1801, like it was around 18. It was actually like, I think, earlier than that. I think it was like 1800. When they actually had the first meeting, and Napoleon was thinking about abolishing slavery to all the colonies, especially Haiti, and giving economic power to the African slaves of Haiti and to other colonies. And he basically went to his wife. At the time, she's Creole. You know what I'm saying? Her name was Josephine. I can't remember. But her first name was Josephine, but she was Empress Josephine at the time. And she was the wife of Napoleon. I think Napoleon II, or I think Napoleon III, but maybe around there. And she basically told him, now she's Creole. Now look, her family was Creole, but they was wealthy and they owned slaves in those colonies in the Caribbean. So she was very, very, very light skinned, but you could tell she had a little bit of features in her. And she told Napoleon straight up, like, why would you free slaves? They're an economic drive force for our empire. Why give them up? That convinced him enough to go back to the meeting and say no. And that's when eventually led to the Haiti Revolution, and he was trying to basically crush the revolution. Because really, they kind of knew there was going to be, it's too many rebellions going on. You know what I'm saying? Too many rebellions. The opinion in Europe was starting to sway on a lot of these economy in Europe. Like, yo, man, it's too much stuff going on. It's too many rebels, too many whites getting killed in these rebels by these slaves. Man, let's just end the slave trade. I think it was because they felt like those new Africans were energizing the population of slaves there that was making them rise up. So they saying, plus it was causing too much death. A lot of Europeans was getting killed in these revolutions. So they kind of was like, man, let's just abolish slavery. So that's when the year of 1807 that was introduced by a Nigerian man. The name was Aquarius something. And he was African, but he lived in England. So he basically came to the Lords of Carmels to England and convinced England to basically to abolish the slave trade of Africans going to the colonies. And 1807, that's when they signed all European colonial powers at the time. They signed the Abolish Act of 1807. That's where they cut the direct slave trade of Africans going there. But the thing was, that was only pertaining to Africans, not to the slave that was already in the colony. So the slave trade was still going on. It was just now getting taken out of the Caribbean and brought to a lot of these countries. Like New Orleans, they were still getting slaves out of Haiti. You know what I'm saying? So you definitely gotta have to wonder why did Africans didn't really push for the abolishment of slavery of all Africans at that time, just Africans on the mainland. And also too, I think there was a connection of slavery with the Africans of slavery. I mean, you know, being forced, maybe some were, but I don't think a lot of them actually benefit from the slave trade. You know what I'm saying? Because they said even after the abolishment of 1807, you had African traders going to the colonies and still participated in the slave trade. If my study proves. So, definitely, there's a lot of things that need to be addressed, and that's why I'm not. I mean, I do support the Pan-Africanism, but there's got to be a two-way street. And then right now, in my eyes, I don't see a two-way street. I just see a one-way street, and it's morally in their favor, not our favor. So. I definitely will say I'm gonna definitely drop a little bit more into it. I'm gonna definitely drop more about the history of coons, also as well. But yeah, there's not all black folks is kin folks as well. So that's definitely what I'm gonna be talking about. All right, one.